fundamental issue here that we're talking about, as important again as these broader immigration issues are, is who's responsible. When a child comes across the border, we heard from Chief Hudson that child is placed immediately in some sort of a facility, not for more than 72 hours. We heard from Mr. Guadian that they then go to HHS. We heard from Commander White that HHS has these children in an HHS-sanctioned facility until they find a sponsor. We heard from Mr. McHenry some of the challenges with getting those kids to their court proceeding to find out whether they have a legitimate claim if they're trying to come into the country under asylum. We also heard the system's just not working well. That more than half of these kids aren't even showing up for their hearing, that we do have, unfortunately, these stories of kids being abused and trafficked. I appreciate the fact we've made some improvements in terms of the background checks, as I said earlier. I want to follow up later on the fingerprints and what DHS does with those, and how we work to ensure that those who are being trafficked are dealt with. But let me just ask you the fundamental question, and I guess this most appropriately goes to HHS and DOJ want to chime in here. Do you all believe that you have the authority, and I suppose you're going to say the funding as well, to be able to continue to take responsibility for these children after they leave your care, in other words, the detention facility? Do you believe you have the authority to continue to have responsibility for these children?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HHS does not presently have the authority to exercise supervision or oversight of children who are not in the physical care and custody of ORR. It certainly does not have the appropriations, and I would submit that at present it is not capacitated to do that, particularly with regard to those elements of the oversight that require law enforcement functions, given that ORR within ACF and HHS is not a law enforcement agency. So the answer is we have neither the authorities nor the appropriations to exercise that degree of oversight after minors exit ORR care.
As you know, Commander White, this is where we have a difference of opinion. I think I speak for Senator Carper and myself, at least, in saying that we believe you do have that authority. We believe Congress has given you that authority. And by the way, if you don't, who does? You actually have the sponsors sign an agreement. Who enforces that agreement? I mean, someone has to do that. Why even have an agreement with a sponsor if there's no way to enforce it? So we think you have that responsibility, but if you don't, I assume you want Congress to give you that authority. Is that correct?
So I'm not the one to say what we would wish. I will say only that we do not have that authority. Neither do we have the appropriations, which would be, the requirement would be considerable.
Yeah, I understand
to
that.
create a national child welfare system in 50 states.
Yeah, additional funding would be required, but again, our issue is when that child leaves your detention facility and goes to that sponsor, and you have the sponsor sign an agreement, who's responsible for enforcing that agreement? Who's responsible for ensuring that that kid gets to his or her court proceeding? Who's in charge? Who's in charge now?
So the number one responsibility for ensuring that the child attends the hearing is the sponsor.
How about the welfare of the child?
The welfare of the child is, again, the sponsor, and if there are deficiencies in that, that is subject to the oversight and authority of the state or local child welfare authority that has jurisdiction over where that child resides, like any child in any community in America.
Yeah, we'll have discussions about this, but from talking to a number of these state officials and state agencies, they don't even know these children are in their state. How would they know that? You know, they aren't even given notice of it often. The kids move, and they do not have responsibility under law, in their view. We do think Congress has provided that, but, you know, this is a gray area, clearly, because you all disagree, DOJ disagrees. So would you support legislation that clarifies the responsibility and authorities, as well as providing the necessary funding?
It's not for me to say what I would support. I will say only that, of course, HHS, as always, will execute all of its requirements under law, and where we have authorities and appropriations, we will execute those faithfully, as we always have.
Senator Carper.